All right, I think we will get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Lynn Hector. I work on Mercy Corps' media and communications team, focused on telling the story of the vital work our teams do around the world. I'm joining you from Portland, Oregon, from my home, not from the Burnside Bridge, as my virtual background would have you believe. Mercy Corps is working around the clock to protect the health and safety of our team and the communities we serve as we deliver life-saving programs to nearly 37 million people around the world and in the US. Today, we're helping people in Guatemala who have survived back-to-back hurricanes in recent weeks. We're helping Ethiopian refugees who have very recently crossed over the border into Sudan. And many of you on the call today are some of our most generous supporters. And so before we get started, I just want to say thank you for your generous support and for making our work possible. This year, we've been able to reach more than 15 million people around the world through our COVID-19 response, addressing both the immediate and the long-term impact of the pandemic. We couldn't have reached that many people or launched our COVID-19 response without your generous support, so thank you. And thank you for joining us today for what promises to be a really, really rich and great discussion about our work with women and girls around the world. Today, we will talk about the power of girls, why we invest in them, and our programs with some of the most vulnerable girls and women on the planet, those who are living in refugee camps. This work is so critical to the lives of young women. And again, thank you to all of those of you who are joining us and who make that work possible. So I'm really thrilled to be joined by a couple of my colleagues. Bessun Jaber. Bessun is our Gender and Girls Safe Spaces Coordinator in Jordan. And we're also joined today by Karen Scriven, who is our Director of Gender Equality and Social Inclusion. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their background. So again, Bessun is our Gender and Girls Safe Spaces Coordinator in Jordan. So Bessun, can you please tell our listeners today a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Jordan. Thank you, Lynn, for your introduction. And thank you, everybody who's joining today. So as Lynn mentioned, I joined Mercy Corps to work on the gender and girls safe spaces component. But before that, I used to work for IRC as a senior research officer. My background is slightly diverse. I worked in investigative journalism before, education and academia. And I'm a feminist. I am part of this amazing network in this region who work constantly to promote gender mainstreaming and gender equality in this region. So I pass it to you.
Thank you, Bessun. We're so happy to have you today and at Mercy Corps. As mentioned, we're also joined by Karen Scriven. Karen is our Director of Gender Equality and Social Inclusion. She's been with Mercy Corps for a long time, and I'm excited to have you with us, Karen. Please introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks so much, Lynn. And thanks everyone again who's joining us today. It's really exciting that you're partnering with us to improve the lives of women and girls around the world. As Lynn mentioned, I've been working for Mercy Corps for about 18 years and in the global humanitarian development space for about 25. I've either lived or worked in many of the countries in which we are operating and have had the great pleasure of visiting some of Bessun's programs in Jordan. My team and I in particular, I work closely with our regional and our country teams to ensure we are reaching women and girls and we're empowering them to lead and manage initiatives. So we believe that gender equality and inclusion is an outcome and it's a choice. And it is a choice that we are intentional about making every day in our programs, in our operations. So thank you again.
Wonderful, thank you. Today, we've asked Bessun and Karen to provide insights into our work with girls, women and girls around the world, including the challenges that our teams on the ground are facing in the midst of COVID-19. Throughout the webinar, we will answer your questions with a Q&A at the end. If you're joining us via the video chat and you would like to ask a question, please click on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can type your question in the pop-up box. We will do our best to answer all of the questions. And if there are any we can't get to, we will make sure to follow up with you after the webinar. So with that, I will turn it back to Karen first to provide an overview of our work with women and girls around the world. And then Bessun will talk specifically about our work in Jordan. Thank you again for joining us today.
Great, thanks, Lynn. So first, I would like to share why Mercy Corps invests in women and girls. So we know that when women and men are both meaningfully involved in their economies, that a country's GDP increases. And so if you think about Kenya, if women farmers were given the same level of education as male farmers, their yields for any crop, maize, beans, they would increase by up to 22%. We also know, and I think global evidence shows, that resources in the hands of women leads to positive outcomes for their family, because women are more likely to spend any income that they control on food or healthcare or education for their children. So we invest in women and ensure that they have the knowledge, the skills, and the resources to be economic actors in their communities. We have a very similar strategy for adolescent girls, because again, we know, and global evidence shows, that for every extra year a girl stays in school, her income increases by 12%. The more she stays in school, the less likely she is to marry earlier, and the less likely she is to have children before her own body is ready to have children. So we invest in adolescent girls because we want to empower them before they fall through one of those many trap doors that are in front of them as they're coming of age. We want to keep girls in school as long as possible before she's dropped out. But if she has dropped out, we want to make sure she has access to that knowledge and those resources that she needs to be an active and be safely engaged in her community. We know that when girls enter puberty, her choices and her mobility become limited. Her parents are very worried about her safety at school and in her community. So for example, this happens, girls often drop out between primary school and secondary school, or between elementary school and middle school, if you want to think about it in terms of schools in the United States. And they're more likely to drop out of school than boys, and more likely to spend the bulk of their waking hours when they're not at school taking care of their siblings and household chores. They're more vulnerable to child or early marriage, pregnancy, early pregnancy, and of course, gender-based violence. And so by investing in girls before they drop out of school and before they're forced to marry early or have children before their bodies are ready, we're aiming to change their trajectory. And this means not only investing in girls, but also then intentionally addressing those barriers, those harmful social norms that keep her back. And so we want to prevent intergenerational poverty by investing in girls. But what does empowering women and girls look like? So, you know, we work, as you know, in so many different countries, in so many different contexts. And so it's going to look different in each one of those contexts. So like an urban setting in Gaza, we are working with young women ages 16 to 24, and we are helping them to engage in coding classes and gain the knowledge and the competencies to become freelance gig workers. We have a huge community center that we have established into a place that is outfitted with a generator and power so that women and men can be there and work on those skills. They can be in a safe place. We have separate spaces just for women so they can feel safe and their families know that they're safe, where they can learn these skills. Most young women in Gaza have limited mobility, and they certainly have limited access to economic activities. And so because of these programs in Gaza that Mercy Corps operates, young women now have access to jobs, and they're able to earn an income from clients around the globe, despite being unable to travel and move freely, even within conflict-affected Gaza. And just to note, interestingly, I was on a freelance platform called Upworks last month, and I was looking on the platform to find a translator who could translate an important document on gender diversity and inclusion from English into Arabic. And lo and behold, I found a translator who was in Gaza who happens to be a graduate of our program. So it was wonderful to have her as someone who was working for me. And she told me that she had been working successfully on this Upwork platform for over a year now and earning a regular income that certainly was not possible before having graduated and gained those skills from Mercy Corps. And Mandy, if you could share the pictures of Simila from Nepal, that'd be great. So in a completely different context, you have the rural areas of far west Nepal. We are working with Dalit girls, and Dalits are one of the most marginalized castes in Nepal. And Dalit girls quite often drop out of school at a young age, whether they're caring for their siblings and families at home, or more often they are servants for other families. So the long-term consequences of these girls are pretty significant. They have limited livelihoods and career possibilities. They're socially excluded. And as a result, they have poor health outcomes. They're at greater risk of gender-based violence in these other homes that they are servants for. And they have absolutely no control over any decision that affects her life. So this obviously then translates into poor outcomes for any children that she may bear. Mandy, I don't know if you were able to find that picture. All right, we'll wait for that picture. I wanted to show a picture of Simila, who is one of the girls that we've been working with over the past 6 years. But so these girls that we're working with in Nepal, most of them have dropped out of school, and we are working with them to build their literacy and their life skills so they can increase their economic opportunities, their financial independence, and their confidence. And over the past few years, as these girls have gained their skills, they came to us and said, you know, we're much more confident now, and we have the skills needed to either expand a family business or open up our own business, but we're unable to access any financial support. And, you know, in fact, education opportunities, vocational opportunities, financial services, none of these are available to Dalit girls. So we established a girls transition fund, and that fund provides small loans for the girls to start a business. And so in addition to the loan, of course, we provided them with business workshops, how to conduct market research to inform your business, how to put together a business plan, a financial plan, and we provided them mentoring from established female mentors. We conducted a survey not long ago with those who received loans from us. And so it had been over a year since they had received a loan from us. And we found that over 98% of the respondents were making on-time payments, but more importantly, they were generating a profit. These businesses were profitable. And it's also important to note that all of the sort of the other impacts that this loan had and this engagement of this program had for these girls. They now were reporting greater respect that they were receiving from not just their households, but community members. So they were really experiencing empowerment on multiple different levels. And nearly every young woman who we surveyed said that they had a sharp increase in their own confidence and in their capacity since establishing or expanding their business, and that community members were much more positive and respectful towards them, and they have gained status and decision-making power within their own household, which to me, that is a huge thing for this, because Dalit girls, they really were treated more of assets than individuals with the capacity to actually provide for herself or her family. So, and as I mentioned earlier, money in the hands of women and girls often gets used to improve the health and well-being of the household. So for them, having this financial independence was just a huge shift. So now with the Dalit girls and this transition fund, we are working with existing financial providers in Nepal and business cooperatives and with women leaders and other partners to establish more of these funds so that we can expand that opportunity for so many other girls. And we hope to transition the management of these funds to local partners so they can sustain these. When we worked with the Dalit girls, most of that work was done in safe spaces. And so I just want to say a few words about Mercy Corps' work globally with girls and young women in safe spaces. These really are spaces where girls and young women, they meet weekly with a female mentor from their communities to learn life skills. And so those can mean things like how to set goals, financial literacy, how to negotiate within their household, basic sexual reproductive health, how to remain safe in their communities, how to avoid risks. And so they learn those life skills. Quite often they learn basic reading and math. They get support from their friends, and they gain knowledge needed to engage in economic activities, either in marketplace jobs, for example, or as entrepreneurs. They often meet they often meet over a 7 or 8 week period of time, and then quite often continue meeting without our support and our assistance. But it's often the only time that girls have the chance to gather together because of their increasing responsibilities at home. And we've seen these safe spaces expand by girls themselves. So in Northeast Nigeria, for example, one of the adolescent girls that participated in one of our programs, she independently built her own safe space from the ground up in her community. She said she learned so much from our program that she wanted to share it with others in her community, and particularly the younger adolescent girls. And so she asked permission from her community leader. She identified the girls on her own with the help of the mentor that she worked with before. And she and the mentor taught curriculum, life skills, from her own home before the local mosque offered her to use the classroom. And she says that now she has the confidence to stay away from those trapdoors, to stand away from everything, stay away from things that stand as a threat to her and her future. I would be remiss if I didn't also highlight the importance of our work with men and boys, because we know that, as I mentioned before, when women have control over their resources, they spend that on their children and the well-being of their families. But we also know that so many women in the communities in which we work, they don't typically have control over their resources. So even income they earn from selling agricultural products from their own household farms, or things that they're engaged in selling in the marketplace, they don't have control over how that's spent. So we work quite diligently with men, husbands in particular, to jointly make decisions in their household. So like in Niger and the Democratic Republic of Congo, for example, we hold regular household decision-making trainings and exercises with couples. And we conduct community-wide messaging around the positive outcomes when decisions are actually made jointly. So these decisions could be anything from how to spend income earned, which plants to grow, which agricultural assets they should be investing in, how they can share time more. So for example, women spend so much time weeding, and that's something that they often spend their time doing, but it can take an enormous amount of time. So how could they share that with their husbands so that they have more time to spend on other income generating activities? And we've also seen, for example, in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, where women have jointly decided with men, in one community in particular, that every time a newborn is born, that is the time in particular that men take over childcare responsibilities for the other children in the house, so that women can exclusively breastfeed in the first 6 months. And they've done that because they have seen, and they have seen firsthand the benefits of breastfeeding newborns. So just to be clear, this is not necessarily the norm in many places. We also have husband schools in Niger, which were established at the request of men to better understand the types of skills that their wives were learning in the safe spaces. And this has resulted in shifts in how resources have been spent. And that has meant that women have had the opportunity to make those decisions on where to spend income and on how to improve their food security by spending money on more nutritional diets for their children. So I just want to end by going back to that example of the girl in Nigeria, because this is about this girl in Nigeria taking on her own initiative to help other girls. And that's really what our programs and why we invest in women and girls. We want them to lead the change that they want to see. And our work is grounded absolutely in the belief that girls and women know their lived experiences better than anyone else. And by leading on the solutions that impact their lives, they will continue to do that and have better outcomes for their families. So we design programs with girls and women, not for them. In Jordan, we identified a gap in knowledge regarding puberty and menstruation among adolescent girls in refugee camps. There really wasn't anyone offering that kind of information to girls, and we wanted to help fill that gap. So we wrote a proposal to a donor to fund this. And initially we thought we would create an app on a phone so that girls could take that phone and go somewhere private and learn what was happening to their bodies when they go through puberty. We were fortunate and we won the grant. We sat down immediately with a bunch of adolescent girls to design the app in the camp. The first thing they said was, we don't want an app. We're not going to use an app. They really value storytelling, and that's what they use to pass along information and knowledge. And so we completely changed the program and let them lead the design and the implementation of that solution. So I will hand it over to my colleague, Bessun, to tell you more about that.
Thank you, Karen. And I am the lucky one who works closely with these girls. And this particular group of girls is amazing. And I want to tell you more about them. Mandy, if you can please share the slides that I've prepared. Thank you. Okay, so I assure you this is not a boring presentation. I am here showing some pictures and telling you some stories about the girls I work with, just representing their voices as if they're here. So this is how we work with girls. In this picture, you see a group of girls in one of our centers, basically playing together, having fun, doing their own thing. Next slide, please. So in the next picture, these are two of the girls we work with. And what does it actually mean to be a girl in Jordan? It is complicated, and says a girl who grew up in Jordan. Gender norms are serious in here, and they do prevent girls' voice and agency, regardless of their nationality. And it's not just in Jordan, it's across the region. Girls in here do have limited mobility. It's not always safe to be outside, and it depends on where the girls are and so on. In Jordan, the study showed that only a third of the Syrian girls who live in Jordan, mainly in host communities, are able to leave the house on daily basis. And that actually is an indicator of the limited access to resources, to opportunities, and also to education. In the next picture, meet Hiba. As Karen introduced already, that we do work in multiple locations, and in Jordan, our programs are in the host communities in Jordan, but also in the refugee camps. And we work in 2 refugee camps where the majority of the population is Syrian. Hiba is 17 years old. Hiba basically joined one of our sessions when we've asked girls to draw how their lives have changed through puberty. We basically asked them to draw when they were 5 and 6 years old, whatever they remember of their childhood, and also what is it like now. And let me read you what Hiba was telling us. She says, here, I used to, meaning when she was younger, I used to live freely. I used to go outside. I used to play outside. It did not matter if I'm playing with a boy or a girl. No rules were set over my life. Where now, she's explaining, Yani, that now it's like people are telling her to wear certain clothes, or that she's not allowed to go outside because it's not safe. And then she says, nowadays, I only study most of the time, and I can use the phone to listen to music sometimes. Like Hiba, in this refugee camp, in Azraq refugee camp, there are 3,000 girls living the same conditions, not able to play outside, not able to walk freely and safely. In this picture, in here, this is what it looks like when we're working with the girls, as Karen introduced. So in here, they're just telling us, they're expressing themselves, they're telling us about their lives, they're drawing, they're learning. And what we've learned is that the girls are actually experts. They know what they need, and they don't have to use our language to express those needs, but they just need a safe space to actually do that. And in the next slide, I want to tell you about one of our amazing activities we have in Jordan. This is one of the activities that I work with closely, and it's called Wise Girls. Wise Girls is an activity that is led by girls, and that is why Jordan's approach is a bit unique, because we have a group of peer educators who are trained on storytelling, story writing, facilitation skills, but most importantly, sexual reproductive health knowledge and education. These girls sat together, joined our team to design this amazing story for children, for young girls. And they basically read that story, as you can see in those pictures. They sit down, they facilitate a whole session with like icebreakers and storytelling, and sometimes they even act up, and it's beautiful. And they just guide each other on such a critical phase in their lives. And I want you to meet one of the girls we work with. She's so special. This is Rawa. Rawa in this white hijab. Rawa in this picture is actually reading the story I was just telling you about. And her friend is acting that story, wearing the glasses. And so Rawa is wearing the purple lipstick, just like it is in the picture. Rawa is 17 years old. She helped design this storybook, and she actually wants to be a story writer. She's very passionate about literature. This one particular photo is very close to my heart, because the girls you see in the very background of the picture are now part of our peer educators group. They, after attending our sessions, joined our group to actually help empower other girls in their community. So yeah, this is one of the activities we have in Jordan. The other activity, and that is not in the CAM, in the next slide, is the Nature Club. The Nature Club is such a unique activity because, as I referred to before, and as Karen explained, in Jordan, it's not, girls are they have access, especially Jordanian girls, they have access to education, but they don't have access, for example, to jobs. It's not easy to get a job. Sometimes they graduate university and it's not easy for them to find a job for multiple reasons. But this Nature Club is an activity where the participant girls are provided with psychosocial support throughout learning survival skills in nature. So it's a structured outdoor activity where they group together, go outside and learn how to survive in nature, utilize resources in nature, and their capacities are built in a way to like manage their stress, manage anxieties and other stressors. And I want you to meet one of the very special girls, Adwa. Adwa is 21 years old now. And Adwa is, as you can tell from this picture, he is making some tea in one of their hikes, during one of the hikes. And Adwa actually was very frustrated because she could not graduate high school. And she barely left the house. Her parents are very strict. And it was through the outreach of Mercy Corps' team that she was able to join this team. And she actually showed a very natural talent of being able to hike and learn outdoor activities really fast. Adwa, who did not graduate high school, is now an adventure instructor. So she actually has a job and she works in the area where she's resident. So I just want you to meet those two girls. There are many. In the next slide, here's a group of our peer educators post one of our trainings. And our volunteers, Syrian volunteers here, everybody is here. Here are those girls I told you about who joined our team recently. So thank you for listening to some of our stories. Let me know if you have more questions.
Great. Thank you, Bessun and Karen. Thank you for sharing those inspiring examples of our work with girls from Nigeria to Nepal to Jordan. We are going to move to the Q&A section of our session today. So again, if you have a question, please click on the little Q&A icon box at the bottom of your screen, and I'm going to be watching for new questions. We have one that we'll kick it off with that just came in before I ask a new question. So one question is, where do the girls in the camps in Jordan come from? So Bessun, I think you can easily answer that one. And I think you're, oh, yeah.
Sorry, could you please repeat the question? Because I was gonna.
Someone wanted to clarify, the girls who are in the two camps in Jordan, where are they coming from? Could you share a little bit about that background?
Oh, yes, of course. The girls come from Syria. The camps I mentioned are in the north of Jordan, and these the families who live in there, the families which live in there, flee Syria in 2011 and have been living in these camps for this approximately for this amount of time. But they're mainly Syrians, yes.
And someone else was interested in knowing, in one of the pictures you showed, there were some puppets. Could you talk a little bit about what those puppets are?
So these puppets are the part of the training the girls receive. The group of peer educators who are part of Wise Girls, they write stories themselves, and they tell stories, and they learn how to. And these puppets are just like their favorite tool. They just love to like have it and tell really complicated stories basically using a puppet. And it's one of the things they are trained on, to reading aloud techniques and the actual technical techniques, but also how to engage audience. And because they the Wise Girls actually relies on the storytelling technique. So this is part of the training. Yeah. Great. They're animal puppets.
Thank you. So we know COVID-19 is affecting everyone's lives. It would be great to hear from you, Bessun, on kind of what the impact is on the pandemic, on the programs, but also the girls in Jordan, and how we've had to modify our programs so that we can continue our work with girls.
Well, I can tell you it is stressful, for sure, for everybody everywhere. But for us particularly, what we really enjoy doing is adapting our tools and adapting our methodology. And that is why, for example, it's led by girls. So what we're doing is we're consulting the girls. We're working with what they have. We know that families in the camps, for example, families of 9 people in the same household share one mobile phone. That is a smartphone. So we're working with the girls using a technique of like asking them to take a photo of their day and documenting these photos in what we call photo diaries. We're sending booklets. We're going back to like very traditional ways of paper booklets we send to their homes. We're adapting slowly, but we're doing it, and it takes a lot of effort from our staff. But these are some of the examples. We're working around COVID restrictions, obviously. So
great, thank you. And Karen, I wonder if you might jump in on kind of broadly outside of Jordan. Are there some common themes in the way that we see the pandemic affecting the girls and women that we work with around the world, and ways that we've had to adjust our programs in this last year?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So, we know that COVID-19 is exacerbating existing gender inequalities. And we know that in many of the places that we're operating, women are experiencing even greater, food insecurity, nutritional shortfalls at greater levels than men, because they typically, and they still prioritize feeding their husbands and their children before them. We also know that most of the women are engaged in the informal economy when they're engaged in economic activities. And those were the first things that had to end as a result of mobility restrictions and because they had to spend more time caring for their kids and spending time on household necessities more so than they did ever before. In fact, we did do a gender in our COVID study in Zimbabwe, and we found that the number of hours that women were spending on household, just meeting basic household needs and on childcare doubled since before COVID. So where before COVID they were spending 6 hours a day on those things, they were now spending 12, which means they had almost zero time for any sort of income opportunities, which we also know they were responsible for. We also did a rapid gender analysis in Ethiopia and saw a huge increase in both gender-based violence and early marriage, and early marriage as a coping strategy for families. So for Mercy Corps and in particular my team, we were working really hard with our country teams and our partners to ensure that anything that we do around COVID is in fact a gender responsive response. So that means that we conduct rapid gender analyses so that we are, again, really reaching women and girls, and we're tracking who we're reaching so we know that those efforts are in fact reaching women and girls and they're effective. And if for some reason when we're tracking, we see less women and girls than we had anticipated, we make adaptations to make sure we're reaching them. We want to make sure that no one is left behind. We're making increases, we're increasing our investments that, on interventions that specifically target women and girls. So we know that most economic recovery support isn't reaching those informal traders, women who have left the marketplace. So we're finding ways to support them through cash and vouchers. We're targeting our food and nutrition security programs to them, and we're working to prevent gender-based violence both in and outside of the home. And then, as Bessun mentioned, this cell phones have. These are really important ways in which we are continuing to communicate with families. So in places like Haiti, we have our community mentors who are supporting our adolescent girls and boys by handing out books, going door to door, leaving a book at the outside of the door, and then arranging with the parents for the parents to give their cell phones at a certain time during a day, certain days a week, to their adolescents so that they can participate in these sort of phone tree calls about the lessons in the book. We want to try to make sure that these safe spaces and these non-formal education activities are continuing. And in Kenya and Uganda, we're working with cell phone companies to create regular SMS-based or text-based lessons to help keep kids, adolescent girls in particular, learning and thriving while we know that they are remaining at home. And like Bessun mentioned, WhatsApp has been a critical tool for continuing to reach girls.
Great, thank you, Karen. We have a few questions around sort of the engagement of families. So I think we know typically a girl might learn about puberty or reproductive health from their mothers. I know, Karen, you talked about sort of how we engage husbands, brothers, men and boys in our programs, but one of our listeners is interested to know kind of how we're engaging mothers, particularly in our programs where we might be talking about puberty or health. So maybe, I don't know if Bessun, you want to talk about that from the Jordan context?
I actually can provide a concrete example that would explain it. So our activity is also structured to outreach to mothers first. Despite the fact that the research showed, the community-led research, the girl-led research showed that mothers don't have that accurate information about puberty and reproductive health, but they do share some myths with their daughters. And that was one of the findings. So the activity was structured around first meeting with the mother, showing her the whole kit, the story, the kit, the tools that are introduced in the session, but also showing her pictures of the safe space and how it is closed and it's private and it's only for girls and it's designed for girls. They actually designed the posters on the walls with their own hands. And then consulting with the mothers first and outreaching to them is like the first step. And then when the girls attend these sessions and a follow-up session afterwards, when they go back home, we, after a couple of weeks, we invite the mothers for a focus group discussion. We invite them in in a very informal, friendly setting, and we talk to them about it. So we ask specific questions about, have you read the story yourself? Did your daughter talk to you about it? And then they tell us, and then we want to learn what is new to them too. And in one of the sessions, I heard mothers say, for example, to me personally, in one of these sessions, they were telling me something like, I cried when my daughter was able to tell me what I wished to know, and nobody was there for me. Like, we have this culture that our mothers did not tell us enough, and now my daughter is teaching me more about our bodies than I've ever known. And this was said to me. So we're constantly working towards understanding how these girls' lives are impacted, but also engaging their caregivers, learning how they're impacting their families as well. So I hope this answers the question.
Thank you. And, I think you've both talked about how beyond some of the concrete skills that we've seen, that these girls are just becoming more confident in who they are and what they want to do with their lives. Someone's curious to know, do we get feedback from the families on these girls? Do we hear from their mothers or husbands that they're observing more confidence? How do we engage sort of family members in sort of seeing concretely the impact that these programs are having on the girls?
Yeah, so we often engage the families at all levels. Certainly being able to engage girls and get them into safe spaces and to work with them on these life skills requires us to work so closely and in partnership with their families. And that means also having regular reflection and even community meetings. So talking with the mentors and seeing how, which are community members, and finding out how they are perceiving the progress of the girls. Talking with moms, talking with dads, talking with older siblings. So the survey I mentioned with the Dalit girls, that was a survey done with the Dalit girls and surveys done with the community members on how they are perceiving girls? How are they perceiving their new engagement in the marketplace, for example? Are they threatened by that? Do they feel like this is a good thing? In Kenya and Uganda, where we did a similar girl program, and we were working with pastoralist girls who had no education, and we were working to build their livelihoods. We took them to the marketplace and introduced them to the vendors that they were going to be dealing with. So if they were in control of livestock, for example, like sheep and goats, we introduced them to those who sold sheep and goats. And these were primarily male business owners. We introduced them to the vets. We introduced them to those who sold vet sheep and goat animal products. So the feed that they would feed the sheep and the goats. And then we would see how that perception of girls coming into the market changed over time. And in fact, it did change over time, where we saw a few vendors in Turkana in Kenya actually helped the girls pick out the best goats because they wanted to make sure that they were breeding goats, and gave girls the opportunity to get more goats as a result of having a breeding goat. Where before they said they would have just sold the girl sort of one of their more sickly goats because they didn't really see the girl as a viable client. So we definitely check in to see how those community perceptions change over time, because that will improve the ultimate well-being and the economic activity and the overall productivity of women and girls in those communities.
Thanks, Karen. And I think you actually answered another question we had, which is really around, are the girls who participate in programs at risk for abuse or persecution, being ostracized from their communities or even from their families for acting outside of their expected roles? But I think you really just touched on kind of this idea of community buy-in, and how we always look at those perceptions in the beginnings of our programs, understand who the stakeholders are, because, as a humanitarian organization, do no harm is our first principle. But is there anything either of you want to add on kind of this issue of in empowering girls? Are there any sort of side effects or any challenges that come up against cultural norms associated with the typical role that girls would play?
I think I might add from my experience that the girls we worked with actually could help their families with the skills they gained. And And some parents are more open and flexible to seeing that positive change. And that is hopeful. So Rawa, who I showed you her picture reading a story, her father said that she now is problem solving every problem at the house. So that is her dad, who at first maybe was not so encouraged to have her participate in the program, for example.
Yeah, and I would just add, Lynn, that in so many of our programs, part of this holistic package of support that we provide girls is also around understanding their environment and making sure that we're tackling those risks around gender-based violence or intimate partner violence. So we do a lot of community awareness raising around protection, around safety, around safety networks, and quite often so when we have these conversations, we ask the community what would they like to see. Again, it's trying to put that solution in the hands of community members. What is most natural in their culture? What is it that they value? And in some places, it's these community networks, protection networks, or protection committees, and they're the ones who are sort of the go-to for when there are issues. They might be more respected elders, or they're a particular female champion for the community, and they're seen as the ones to go to for if there are incidents of gender-based violence or domestic violence. So we're constantly looking and working with communities to strengthen that understanding of gender-based violence, of domestic violence, and helping to raise awareness of what happens to a community when you have an increase in violence, such as a loss of income because you might have, a survivor who then can't work anymore, or it impacts the family to great extent if the woman is not able to work any longer. So we want to raise that as a community issue and not just as a household issue. And we also know, I noticed another question around family violence. And we're super excited about a new program that we started just recently in Niger and in Jordan, as a matter of fact, where we're working closely with older male siblings and male caregivers, so fathers, for example, of adolescent girls to increase their girls' safety and response and promote non-violent gender norms, because we know that one of those greatest predictors for young people engaging in violence or being a victim of it is if they've witnessed it as a child in their own home. So we want to try to work with male siblings and caregivers to change that norm, so that when they grow up, these older male siblings, and they have their own families, that they're not perpetuating that violence. So we're training on what are some peaceful ways of responding to triggers. What are those triggers, and really understanding at a very personal level what those things are. And so we are excited to test out this program and to expand it as we get more learning.
Great. Thanks, Karen. You had a great example of the husband schools in Niger and how men really wanted to be engaged to understand, the tasks that their wives were doing. Are there any other examples you would share around how men and boys respond to these programs in Jordan, maybe with Wise Girls or some of our other programs? I think it's great to hear, as we're proactively engaging men and boys, how are they reacting as they see kind of the change that's happening in their wives and daughters and sisters' lives?
Well, in order for us to be real, there are some very resistant mindsets that we work with. And we worked with girls whose brothers would not allow them to use the phone. And then we had to negotiate. So that is one of the things not us negotiate, but also learn the girls how to negotiate themselves. But what I would like to highlight is that, for example, in the Jordan Country program, we've realized that we can't work. We know this, and there's evidence to this existing already. But we observing and working with these girls, the group of Wise, the group of girls participating in Wise Girls, for example, that we also need to engage the families. And knowing that we're only a girl-focused program kind of shifted our strategy to engage with another MC program, and that is a family strengthening program. And together, working together in the camps made it possible for us to invite the mothers for other activities and the fathers too, because this other program, for example, is providing parenting activities. And then when you basically present the family this holistic sort of approach, when everybody has a place in this center, in this safe place, in this safe area, there's also a playground, and then the children can come when a mother is participating in a session. So this is what actually made it possible for us to engage even more people and more girls and more caregivers. But of course there are challenges. Of course there are parents who we need to sit with, and there are fathers who they need to meet us first. So home visits, adding to Karen's point on awareness and consultations, I meet with fathers to ensure I sit inside of the house and we talk to them, and then they need to know who we are and what are we coming in with, and it makes them feel very comfortable. So building that trust and actually coming into their houses, sitting inside of the house and talking to the fathers and making sure that they feel that they have a voice. They made a decision of sending their daughters to our activities. This is like one of the very important sort of maybe strategies we use.
Yeah, and that's a great example. And just to piggyback on that with what Bessun just said, in Turkana in Kenya, where I talked about the girls who were going to meet into the marketplace and meet the vendors, we started off with them, with girls really just focused on chickens. And I say this just because that at the time was the only thing that they were already active in taking care of at the household level. And when we talked with families about increasing their assets and control over other assets, that was definitely not something they wanted to think about. They thought, well, you can work with them on the things that they're already working on. So we started from there. And as we built the girls' knowledge and skills around how to even take care of the chickens beyond just feeding them. So what does it mean to actually take care of them and see whether they can breed, see whether or not they can add more chickens? As we built their comfort zone and the parents' comfort zone around those assets, we were able to expand to the point where when girls are married in Turkana, in that area of Kenya, they are typically not allowed to bring their assets with them. So they would leave the chickens behind. They would leave any asset behind. As a result of the program and working with these families and working with their future families, it was decided, and the girls' parents decided, that they could take their goats with them, which was a huge change in the way that their fathers felt about them and valued them. So it was a real shift for cultural norms. But it does take time.
Thanks, Karen. We only have a few minutes left, so I'd love to talk about kind of the vision for going forward. Karen, what do you see the vision for our work with women and girls? What are you excited about? How do you see these programs evolving, changing, maybe in 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, so I guess I would say that one of our core real focus areas moving forward is all about this economic empowerment and that holistic package that goes along with supporting girls to be active economic actors in their communities. We really want to expand and scale those models that we already know are effective. So the ones in Nepal, for example, the ones in Turkana. We have just started another girl program in Haiti, and we really want to take those models and expand those because we know that they have increased their self-confidence, their financial independence, their knowledge, their skills, and their success as they transition into adulthood. So I think that's where we'd like to really sort of expand and scale up those models that we already know are working. And I think we'll have some opportunities in 2021, especially if this pandemic gets under control.
Great, thank you. And another question that came in is around sort of sustainability of our programs. I think you had that great example from Nigeria of a girl who was so inspired that she kind of took the safe space forward and made it her own. But how do we ensure that women and girls continue to receive services or support when our programs end?
Yeah, so and we really can't wait to think about sustainability until the end of an initiative. This is something that we need to think of right in the beginning of our programs, and think about, if we're starting this and we're in control of resources, or we're the ones making decisions with girls on this programming, who's going to play that role towards the end of the program, and how do we help shift that responsibility throughout the program rather than waiting until the end. So for example, in Afghanistan, where we are running some programs for women around vocational training, we're looking at who's already playing that role of being a provider of vocational training. Maybe they're not providing it for women, but how do we partner with them to demonstrate that this is a real opportunity for members of their communities, and look at ways to transition that ownership of that type of initiative over time to them, so that they can then continue it. Same thing like with the Girls Transition Funds in Nepal, looking to existing financial service providers who originally are like, we're not touching that because we don't normally even lend to girls, to Dalit girls. But as we can show and demonstrate repayments and business profitability with them, then we go to them and say, okay, now we've demonstrated it. Wouldn't you want to have this as a client? So oftentimes when it comes to economic empowerment, we're looking to the private sector and we're making the business case as these are future clients for them. These are women who are going to be making decisions, who are going to be buying products in the marketplace, accessing loans. And so trying to create those partnerships, so for them to look at these clients as real clients in the future, real customers.
Thanks, Karen. We're just about at time, but I want to turn it back to Bessun for one last question, which is, what do the girls that you work with on a daily basis tell you that they are hopeful about in their future? And what do you think that the girls in Jordan that we saw in those beautiful pictures would want all of our listeners here today to know?
That's a great question. Thank you. Thank you for asking that. I think I'd tell you what they constantly tell me and what I constantly see, that they have dreams, and it surprises me. Not a surprise in the sense of like not possible, but the fact that these dreams are very sometimes small, sometimes really big, and at times they're talking to them now, especially with COVID, for example. All they want is just to get back to these like girls' caravan that they actually feel so much ownership over, or other girls who just want to play on a swing without having to compete or share that swing with anybody else. They just want access to that playground that Mercy Corps has for a couple of hours a day. And sometimes they just tell you that they want to fly on an airplane. They all want to fly on an airplane. This session, we once sat together, and there was like about 50% of 37 girls who drew airplanes on their future and dreams page, something. So yeah, that they actually have dreams, and they want to do stuff. And I think what they would also tell you, how important family is for them. They never stop talking about how much they care about their parents and other relatives who are in like other countries, who are refugees in, for example, Turkey. They keep mentioning those people. They mention their relatives, and have that strong feeling of I think nostalgia to also Syria. So they have so much that they can share. But yeah, definitely a lot of dreams and a lot of love for their family.
Thank you, Bessun. I think that is a lovely note to end on. If you didn't get a chance to have your question answered, or if you think of a question, someone on our team will make sure to follow up with you. I want to thank Karen and Bessun for joining us today. And again, I really want to thank everyone who took the time to listen in. There's a lot going on in the world. and both, in our personal lives and in our families' lives, and we just so appreciate your support of our work. Again, we cannot do the work that we do around the world, reaching nearly 37 million people without your support. And we're, I think, so grateful and inspired that you took the time today to learn about the work with women and girls. And I hope you walk away feeling as inspired as I am about some of these girls we work with. And again, we deeply appreciate your partnership and hope you have a wonderful day, evening, night, wherever you are in the world. Thank you.